Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Back Ups.
What's up, everybody? We are the Back Ups. I'm Timbo B. Davis, and I coach football, and that guy is
Connor B. Fickley, and I coach football.
That's convenient because it's a football podcast. On the show today, we're really excited to have an old friend, an old West coach, a guy who's been all around the United States, courtesy of Uncle Sam, and is now located in Oklahoma, coaching for Norman North, special teams coordinator, inside receiver coach, Zach Fleming. Welcome on the show, Zach.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
We're stoked. It's kind of like a family get-together. Let's be real. Zach was with us at West for a few years, went off. You were at Norman. No, you were at Bishop McGinnis.
I was at Bishop McGinnis in Oklahoma City. Yep.
Okay, and then you came back to West, and then now you're gone again. So the United States Air Force was so kind to let us borrow him for a couple of years, and now he is retired.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about retirement and the second career real quick here.
So retirement's a definite transition. You go from working in a squadron of 110 people to hanging out at the house. And no, but it's good. So I figured out I wanted to be a coach, I think probably my first year coaching, like 2004. And then figured out I could probably just retire and then get a second paycheck and, not be a struggling teacher right away. Supplement that with Uncle Sam's retirement check. And right now I'm just working on my teacher certifications. So I passed, one of the tests, and now I'm passing my subject matter expert test. And then I'll take one class in the spring on classroom management, which is dictated by the state of Oklahoma. And then I should be a certified teacher.
I love it, man. That's so cool. That's really awesome. Giving service to the country, and now getting to you're not a rookie by any means in the coaching world, and that's the cool part of having you on. Because what we're doing today, we're talking about what it means to build a program, and to me, by far, I look up to you because you've seen programs you've coached in Cali, and I'll let you tell a little bit more about where you've been. Yep. But Cali. You're from Nevada, you've been to Alaska, you've coached in Oklahoma. So you've seen a various range of cultures and how they treat football in their school. So tell us a little bit about your life journey to get to coaching before we dive into the X's and O's.
Yeah, perfect. I started coaching in 2004. I was in instructor upgrade, had a ton of downtime. And so I figured might as well make some use out of my time and still love football. So I volunteered at Wilsey Wood High School, which is in Vacaville, which is halfway between Sacramento and San Francisco. And I was out there from 2004 to 2010. And then I commissioned in the Air Force. And so they sent us to Alabama and Florida. So I stayed on for 2 years as like a scout breakdown guy. And so I broke down film, sent in notes to the head coach that I worked for. Who's an awesome guy, Carlos Moraz. He kept me on, kind of doing that for 2 years until basically I wound up in Alaska. Came to Alaska in 2012, and I think I showed up and met you in like October, which was like at the end of the season, which is kind of crazy for everybody else in the United States that football ends in October.
What was your first thought getting up here and seeing that? Done.
It was pretty awesome because we were at Chugach High School. And so, it's set right there up against the Chugach Mountains, watching a semifinal game. Then in 2013, officially went on at West as a position coach. Was there for 3 years. I did outside linebackers for the first 2 years and then O-line 2015. And then very reluctantly got PCS down to Oklahoma, which ended up being a super blessing in disguise because I got on at Bishop McGinnis High School, coached there in 16 and 17, and then made it back to Alaska for 2018 through 21 and was the O-line coach for 3 years and retired in 2021 this year. Came back to Oklahoma. My wife got a job here at the OU Children's Center. And so kind of time to support her career after basically 4 moves in 10 years, which is kind of the Air Force officer life. Once you make it to a certain point, you kind of just end up moving every 2 years. And so once we had Jameson in 2014, my son, it was like, well, I don't really want to move every 2 years. So I kind of want him to have a stable childhood. Even though I think there's a lot of pluses and minuses, for children moving and making new friends and assimilating into new environments and, meet new people. We just kind of thought it was better to retire and then eventually settle on somewhere. And so we're still figuring that out, but hired at Norman North. So I work for Justin Jones. So I work for Bishop McGinnis High School. He took over 6A1 program down here in Norman, Oklahoma. And he was awesome about bringing me on once we figured out this is where we're going to be, and created a role for me as a special teams coordinator, which for most schools on the west side of Oklahoma doesn't really exist. On the east side of Oklahoma, they kind of have guys that are dedicated to that role. Most of them are position coaches / special teams coordinator, I think is the way that most people do it in high school programs throughout the United States. But, special teams, you can tell the difference in special teams. Like we played, Jinx, and Jinx would have a different setup every week for like their punt return. You never saw the same punt return setup every week. And so, when you're preparing against teams like that, it makes it, great as a special teams coordinator because, you got to work. But you also know that there's somebody on the other side that is also watching your film, breaking down your tendencies, your kicking tendencies, where your ball placement is, what your blocking assignment up front. He's going to send a block based on what our punt front is doing. Our release time, our operation time for our punt team, which is something that we preach heavily, is our operation time from snap to catch to kick. All that goes into that, and so you kind of play that game just like you would an OC or a DC of like, hey, I know if he's showing a 64 front, then I know he's probably coming either some type of block or some type of bluff. And I know when he's got 8 up front, he's probably bringing a block, and I just have to figure out where that block's coming from. So
I love it. It's funny to me because, not taking any shots here at Coach Davis or anything, but, going from high school to college, I totally grasp the importance of special teams, in that sense. And then getting a chance, even when I was playing in college, it didn't really affect me until I, kind of put my coaching hat on. And I got a chance to really deep dive into all those details you just kind of hit on and how important they are. And I get excited now thinking about special teams and all those little details, watching like the Seahawks and that long fake punt they had this over the weekend. And then, last night's game with the Patriots and the Bills and all that wind and how crazy, depending on where you're punting on the field and, all that kind of stuff. So you're absolutely right. It's just, it's fascinating and definitely underrated, I think, in a lot of aspects.
I'm still waiting for Belichick to coming into a wind game where he like double defers, where he like has him kick off twice.
The double defer.
Take the wind at his back. I'm still waiting for that moment. I want to see the double defer. I think it's.
I made that mistake my first year as a JV head coach. They were like, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Kick." And they're like, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah." And they're like, "You mean defer?" And I said, "No, I mean kick." And then, we kicked twice. And I was like,
well, if you ask me, you probably just had a real intense windstorm, and it was a genius move. Field position, winning the game. I love it. Well, hey, so what we're going to do is we're going to dive into, again, you just circled it up. We have offense, defense, special teams, Alaska, Oklahoma. You've seen Cali in between. You've seen a little bit of everything. So what I want to pick your brain on, I want to learn from, we're building a program tonight. And you're head coach now. You're running a program. And I know obviously regions are going to matter. Yeah. And the situation is going to matter. But in the most general terms, you're running a program. What are the first steps? Things you've seen, things you've researched, things you like. What are the first steps that you're going to take as you establish that program?
Number one, for me, it's come down to a lot of is it a single school district or is it a multi-school district? So I think in a single school district, I'm going to have the autonomy that I know what my feeder is. So I know that every elementary school, middle school is going to feed into my program. And so, maybe I don't have to put that much work into recruiting the lifeblood of my program, which is middle schools. If you're in a multi-school school district, you might have to do that. and so, figuring out whether you're open enrollment or closed enrollment, I think is important to understand before you take that job. So, for me, if I was taking over a multi-school, in a multi-school district, then, I want to know what are my feeder schools, because I want to feed the lifeblood of my program first. And I learned that, firsthand here under Coach Jones, who does a tremendous job of, there's a clinic in the summer, a 1-day deal where you get all the kids out, and it's an open deal where, grades 2 through 5 are coming out, and doing kick, pass, and punt, doing every drill, with every position. And so that kids just get exposed to that. And I think one of the big things that also does is, a lot of times you put kids in a shirt that says your school name on it. And that may be where they want to go. And I learned that in California too. We had 2 schools in our school district with it wasn't open enrollment, but before your freshman year, you could pick which school you wanted to go to. So our rival school, which was Black and Orange, ironically, they did a great job of putting kids in, Vacaville t-shirts. And they had camps designed to get those kids on campus. They had designs to get them to go through the field and the field house and the locker room. And, they did a phenomenal job of recruiting the school, not recruiting kids, but recruiting the school. And so I think, once you create that identity and that juice that you want feeding into a school and a program, I think that's important. So, and then I think creating your identity. So once you take it over, I think, from everything I've read, and again, I haven't been a head coach, even though someday I want to be, those first interviews you have with those kids, we kind of figure out, what are the things that kids really want? What are the things that they feel like has to stay? What are the cornerstones, I guess, of what they feel like is important to the program, and then what can kind of go, and you can kind of create your identity from that.
Great point. You mentioned identity.
Yeah.
And those first interviews, I kind of want to go into culture is such a thrown around word. We're friends. We know Randy Jackson, who wrote the book on the culture to feed strategy stuff, and he's big on core values. Are with these first interviews would you be drawing information from these guys for those core values? Is that where you're looking for that? Do you have your own set that you bring in? What are your thoughts on creating that type of identity?
Yeah, I live in an idealistic place because I'm not a head coach, and so I can create an ideal situation for which I get to kind of walk into. But for me, I've thought about it a lot. I think, for me, whatever my mission statement is, as a head coach, which, I'm working through now is I kind of want those core values to either align or closely align with that mission statement. And so I think input from, your kids is important. But as we heard about, Randy Jackson talk about, is like, I kind of had an idea of where I wanted it to go, but I kind of had to let the kids get there. And so, you kind of have that preloaded, hey, are you guys talking about this? And then, it kind of just goes. And so, for me, that's one of them. I kind of want to have that, love and accountability, commitment, effort, discipline, I know they're always buzzwords that people use. But if there's something that we can put into, pillars or core values or however you want to say it, your staples of the program, that's kind of the way I think about it. So
going from there, Coach, talking about the kids and all the core values, in order to get all that, what kind of staff then would you want to put together? Then what kind of guys are you looking for to get together then to get all those core values and to reach to all the kids?
I think your staff's super important from the aspect that, they got to challenge you. They got to challenge you intellectually. I don't think you need staff members that challenge you every day, your every decision. That's not what I'm talking about. But I think you need people that are going to challenge you to maybe get out of your comfort zone, maybe think outside of the box, maybe, say, hey, be a sounding board sometimes for, hey, is this the way we want to go? Ultimately, it resides with the head coach, but there's, I think in the current staff I'm on, we have 18 coaches on staff right now, and it's like, that's 18 different individuals that have, hundreds of years of experience, and so there's a lot of good knowledge that you can pull out of that, and it maybe you think about something from a different angle you hadn't thought about it from before, and so you don't have to attack it alone. So that's one aspect I would want from a staff. I'd always want to learn from my staff. So I'd want to hire people that, either, maybe are just in a position where they just want to be a position coach because, they're at that point in their life that's what they want to do. Maybe you hire a young and up and coming coordinator because, they have a lot of promise and they may not be there long, but you may learn from them. So, I think a diverse staff is good. And I think a staff that is able to assimilate and work together because not everybody's going to get along. So, I learned that in the military. It's just not going to happen. But a staff that's built on mutual respect and understanding of, really what the job is and what it entails, I think is big. So
it's great because I get to hear this too from your side of it. It's awesome. And we've talked a lot about this, but it's awesome. I'm blessed. I got a former player, former coach, and a former coach. This is great. I'm learning a ton right here. So, but
that was good.
Talking about coaches, building a staff. We're building this program. What I find is that the great majority of my time right now at West is realistic. If you break it down, I'm spending more time in the weight room over a 365-day period with our guys than any other place. 3 hours to 4 to 5 hours a week, depending on how many times I'm in there with them. And so that's such a huge point of contact for players and their coaching staffs, whether it's athletic period, 7th hour, after school, evening lift, whatever. But the strength and conditioning piece is big. What are some thoughts you have on strength and conditioning, scheduling? What would you hey, you got a program. What are you going to try to do with that?
Just power cleans. No,
I love it.
Nothing but
just power cleans for days. I think breaking it down into, a lot of people break it down into phases of your off season, which I think is great. I do think power cleans is an integral part of, football. But I think you look at it from from December to May, how are we going to break those phases down into, and luckily for us, we get into spring football in May, and then June, July, we have what's called Summer Pride, where we're lifting basically the entire program in a 2-hour period, which is 100+ kids coming through. And so you have to be highly organized. You have to have space. So I think a big part of that is, use what you got. When we were in California, we had a weight room that was, probably bigger than some people's master bedroom, wasn't very big. And so we had to get very creative. And the head coaches that were at the end of my tenure there, they ended up really flipping the program, really did a good job of getting out of the room and taking weights outside. And luckily in California, you can kind of do that for most of the year. So in Alaska, that'd be pretty tough to do in the wintertime.
2 months out of the year.
Yeah.
Muscle Beach isn't quite the same up here in January.
Yeah. So, I mean, knowing your program, your atmosphere, kind of what you can do, what you can't, but in California, we could do that. We could take weights outside. We could do all of our Olympic lifts outside because we're just throwing them down on the concrete. And so really, all we're really hurting is the bumper plates at the end of the day. But you had space, you had availability of kids. And so, that was a big key to us kind of flipping our mentality of, staying in our racks. We went to De La Salle and, theirs wasn't much better, which was kind of unique. When you saw De La Salle back in the early 2000s, everybody thought they would have this massive weight room with, huge racks and all this stuff. And they had, basic equipment and, those guys stayed in their racks and they did a ton of stuff. but they did farmer carries outside, and they would carry plate weights outside. And so there wasn't a lot of secret sauce to it other than they all did the same thing. They all worked really hard. And I think a big part of that is, once we talk about we set our core values and we set our mission statement, that's really where I think that culture starts to take hold. I think if you wait all the way until September to start pushing, what your values are and what your team values, and I think you're probably going to be late. But I think if you start that in January and you start pushing that through the weight room, and really that's where you start building that bonding piece, I think it takes a lot more effect than anything else. But
absolutely. And I think you make a great point, Coach. Like I said, right, it starts in the weight room and it starts, like you said, in January early on. And I love your point too about, using just what you have, trying to be creative and just make it fun for the kids. I know that just makes, a workout so much more enjoyable when you got, like I said, a group of guys that are in there working hard and having fun together. That's good stuff. My next question here is, we got a coaching staff, we got the core values, we got the strength and conditioning part. Now tell me, what are we running on offense and defense? What are we scheming up? What are we going? Are we throwing the ball around? What are we doing?
I've had the fortune of taking over as an OC, a program, and being, hey, we were under center, basically a single back or an I form team. And my coach handed me the keys and said, whatever you want to run. And so we went split back veer, which is probably one of the hardest offenses to install when you haven't been a split back veer coach. And so I learned a tremendous amount in that first year. So I think part of it is, and we ended up going to some spread concepts later on in the season because that's what our kids were comfortable with. And also that's what fit our kids. And so, if I was a coach walking in and I didn't know, anybody from Adam day one, part of my, intro interview process would be, what is the offense? What is the defense from their perspective? Is that an offense or a defense that you identify with? Is it, something that identifies this school? And if it is, then maybe, that's something that you have to work through, or you eventually have to phase in and phase out as you come through that program. I'm a guy now that's been in a spread system for, years. And so it would be hard for me to walk in and say, okay, we're running the wing tee. We've run the wing tee for 70 years and we're going to go spread. And so, there may be merits to gun wing, or there may be where it's, merits to getting, gun through, and then, you eventually phase that out into what you're comfortable with. So I think a lot of it has to do with, kind of the temperament of those kids, how many seniors you have coming back, how many underclassmen. If you have a ton of kids you can mold and, kind of form, then maybe you just want to clean the slate and go with it. But again, I'm an option guy at heart. So, I'm going to try to figure out ways to get back to the option, even in spread looks, as much as I can, because I think it puts the defense in a bind. And the other joy of, coaching in, really 3 different states is, and through, I think 6 head coaches now, is I've seen a ton of defenses. So, anywhere from, split 4-4 to 4-3 to 3-4 to 3-3 stack. And so really at the end of the day, I think one, you match it to your kids. My defense philosophy is match it to your kids, match it to the bodies that are in the building. If those bodies aren't in the building, then you may not want to run it. So if they are, then you find a staff that can run it. You find a staff that can do it really well. You find a staff that's knowledgeable about it, or you give them the means and the opportunity to get knowledgeable. So, if they don't know about it, but they're eager to learn, where can I send them? What is within my control and my means of availability to get them the tools to be successful. So, in an optimum world, we're running a spread option team, and then we're sitting in a 3-4 with a multiple defensive front attack to it. But again, to me, it depends on the school you're at and where they are.
How much history do you have to take into account? I know you brought it up, but speak to that a little bit more. The history of the team versus the personality of the coach, and then the identity that you're trying to bring in. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think for me, another big part of it is how much of the staff are you going to keep? So are you going to wholesale change the staff, right? So if you're going to wholesale change the staff and you have a staff that you're going to bring with you and in place, then I think you can wholesale change and offer a certain defense fairly easily. If you're going to come in and, you know, say they've run the wing T for 60 years, and they have a wing T coach that you can keep on staff that's going to be fairly knowledgeable and it's going to assimilate into your staff, then maybe you want to keep them on, because maybe that is the only identity of that team. And although times are changing and, you know, that's, you know, seems like an old school way of doing football, despite what you just watched on Monday night of running the ball like 27 straight times. You know, but to me that kind of, it's variable, not to be a political answer, but in a perfect world, you know, I want to run what I'm comfortable with. And so, but if, you know, like we've seen here, you know, like I said, we played Jinx and Union, and they have kids that are 6'3" and they're 310 pounds and they can line up in the eye and they can push you around. So, you know, when they get in a spread, it gets a little bit different, but when they line up an eye and they line up at heavy wing sets and they push you around, that's their identity. And so, you know, it's like, well, how far away from that identity do you want to go? Do you want to go away from it because you're bored, or do you want to go away from it because the pride tells you that you go away from it, because that's not what you know? So I've seen a lot of stuff. You know, I haven't coached in the T. You know, I haven't coached down in the T or the double wing, or but you know, I think it's interesting. There's some merits to the wing T. There's, you know, it's a really hard offense to defend. And there's, you know, if you have the bodies to do it, I think it's great. If you got a bunch of 180-pound O linemen that are going to be out there, you may want to run some more zone option schemes that give you double teams at the point of attack and things like that. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, perfect. I love it. And because I've always been, you know, I'm just fascinated with how building an identity coincides with the scheme that you happen to run. You know, actually, here's the craziest part. The shameless plug for episode 2 of this season. We did the whole Kentucky playbook from 1997.
Yep. And
I went back and watched Hal Mummy with Tim Couch watch the game together. It's on YouTube. It's out there. And Hal Mummy kept talking about how being under center split backs should be making more of a comeback. He was very big on under center. Tony Franklin, the last few years at middle, he talked about getting under center more. So it's interesting. I know that's just simply how you get the snap, and I get that. But it's really fascinating, just that one thing, hearing guys that they're never going to go under center to like, they're saying, hey, something to consider. And so I think like we as coaches, we get married. I know I get married to things, and it's hard to break what you know. And it's really fascinating to me for coming into a new situation. So that's why I asked that question.
Yeah. I think, you know, tight ends, another one, inline tight ends are another one that are underutilized when you start talking about today's offense.
You know, ask you that.
Yeah, really, you know, for me, I think, you know, one of my favorite sets is trio. So you have a single, you know, wide to one side and trips to the other side, basically, because really a defense has to make a decision on how they're going to treat that tight end side. Are you going to keep a corner over there? Are you going to, you know, cowboy the corner to the other side and bring that safety down into the box? You know, really leave your strong safety over there, leave your high safety up over the trip side, and then detach, you know, a backer to that trip side. You know, really declare that. And now you're looking at, okay, what is our matchup? You know, if our matchup is our 6'5" tight end on a strong safety, then, you know, we could probably deal with that. We can arc release that guy. We can down block that guy. If you're going to play a 7 or a 6 or a 9, you know, now we can start figuring out how we get into our run fits, you know, so how we run fit with a tight end, because a defense really has to declare, you know, if you're playing a 3-3 stack and you're going to put a tight end down, are they going to stay in a 5? Are they going to keep a 4-eye and walk the invert down? You know, really get back into, you know, kind of a nickel front look. And now you go, okay, we're just attacking a nickel. You know, we're not attacking the 3-3 stack anymore. So, you know, tight ends is one of those things where, again, I think if I had the body types in the building, I would really invest heavily in tight ends. as well as under center and some of those things. Because I think under center gives you play action ability that gun does not. Gun's great at a lot of things, but a quarterback to fake a handoff and boot the other way and do it at a high level is really a weapon in an offense.
Well, gosh darn it, you left a year early.
1 year early.
One of the fun things we did, and I want to pick your brain on this because you were the inside receivers coach down there as well as we're talking team. One of the, we got it kind of because Connor and I just started doing this podcast and watching the Shanahan stuff and really fell in love with the play action that you can do. A lot of it being under center to be effective. Totally agree. But finding the positionless player, and seeing the studs for like the Rams example was what I kind of came back to. And what we did is we happened to find that there were those bodies that have probably been underutilized in our building for years, to be totally honest, to some degree. And we found that by condensing formations and moving things around, all of a sudden you can have 3 tight ends depending on what you put out there to a side. You can put a big guy that doesn't play a whole lot, give him a fun number, give him a job. Hey, we're running outside zone your way, kiddo. Let's learn the steps and go from there. So tell me about the diversity of the inside receiver type stuff that you have had the opportunity to coach up at Norman North.
Yeah. So, we have an H position, I think, which most spread offenses do. Our H is traditionally our inside receiver. They don't do a whole lot in the box. Traditionally they're split or, we're going to get them to the outside if we can with the matchups. And this year we had 2 phenomenal ones and they're both juniors. And so they're both coming back, and so lucky as a position coach to get 2 guys that played a ton of varsity snaps that get to come back. The other way that, we kind of look at it is we have the ability to split out a lot of guys into our slot. And so, we really have 3 or 4 different positions in the backfield or to put in an inline. And we can split those guys out. We can put them in close. We can do a multitude of different things in our offense. And that's one of the things that makes our offense very unique, I think, is that, we have the ability to be very multiple in that. So, one day I could be, or one play I could be coaching a slot receiver and the next play I could be coaching our running back who's split out as the inside receiver. Or I could be, coaching our outside receiver that's now inside and our inside receiver's outside. And so, really every play, you have that ability to coach a bunch of different guys. I think the hard part about that sometimes is, you have some guys that, like Oklahoma State has a cowboy back. You guys have the flybacks. Some of those you just coach that back, or sometimes you just say, hey, it's inside, outside, and you delineate it that way. You learn a tremendous amount about the offense when you have to coach a position player that doesn't have a designated role every single play. Outside receivers are pretty unique in that, whether you're an X or a Z, you kind of line up at that X or Z spot. There's not a lot of difference between those, or flankers or split ends. If you want to get real old school, there's not a lot of difference between those guys. But now when you start including, really tight ends that are in the backfield, or your H's that can come down and get close and now can motion through or carry out, fakes from the backfield. Your jet guys, which is really kind of where that jet offense went, is really from that split out slot receiver. It forces you to learn the offense, I think, differently. I think it's really good for a first year or second year guy. If you have a guy come in and you go, hey, we're going to give you freshman receivers and you're going to coach the outside guys. Because you can learn the route trees from the outside. And then you go, okay, now the next year you're going to come in and you're going to coach the insides. Oh, by the way, you're also going to coach the Y, when he's split out. And so you have to know, when that Y split out, is he part of the run game or is he not? Is he part of the pass game or not? Are we going to put him in motion? What does that motion do to everything else? And so you start learning the offense, I think, from that way, which makes it pretty unique and pretty different. So I love what I do. I love being an inside receiver coach because I have to know a tremendous amount about the offense. And really the way that, Coach Collins and I did it here is we ended up splitting left and right. And we did that for relationship reasons. Because when you get to coaching just the H, and for me, I have a tremendous underclassman H who's going to be an all-state guy his senior year. We have a pretty good relationship. What I found is that I didn't have a relationship with the outside receivers. And so, you kind of figure out, how do you do it in practice? Well, if I just coach the outsides, but my outsides are 47 yards apart every single play, how do my eyeballs work that way? So unless you're kind of, split-eyed, basically or you kind of stand right in the middle where the O-line coach and the quarterback coach and the running back coach and everybody else stands, to coach those guys, it gets kind of hard. And so what we found is that we had a much better relationship when we flip sides. And, the way we did it is it was really organic. It was like, hey man, what side do you want today? Left. Okay. I'm going to go to the left side. So, I got to coach, then I got to coach the left side. And again, in our offense, really our left and right side receivers don't change that much. So really I could coach an outside receiver one play, or I had all three receivers on the next play. And so it makes you a much better coach, I think, from that perspective. Yes, I'm the inside receivers coach, but I also got to build a relationship with our outside receivers, our second receivers, our second H's, everybody. So I think it's a good way to look at it.
You said relationships. I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Like you said, you can't be a chameleon and look out to the outside and focusing on your guys on the inside. And like you said, one play you might have one tight end, and then the next play you got three wide receivers that you got to get lined up and get them to play call and stuff like that. So I think that's super fascinating. And as well as, like you said, that Y position or that tight end position who has to know so much when he's moving around on both sides, on the line, off the line, in the backfield. And I love that point you made too, where like, obviously it's great for that kid to be a stud because you can do a lot of great things with them, but it also just has to be smart. He may not have to be your best player athletically on the field, but he's got to be smart. He's got to, like you said, got to know where to be, how to line up, and then just go out there and do his job. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I gotta ask, so did you ever just like Rochambeau for like left, right, or like, cause that to me is really cool that you guys were like, hey, I got left today, I got right today. Cause to me, you're right. Relationships are being built.
Yeah. I think we figured out, we didn't Rochambeau. Wasn't like a death match to see who got to coach who that day. But what I found is I had a tendency to go to the right, which I think is I talked about kids with this. I'm right-handed. And I talk about to kids, figure out where to stand next to your position coach. Because if I always turn to my right and I go, hey, I need a guy, then I'm always turning this way, then you stand on my right. And we had a kid who was a sophomore that did that this year. He always stood on my right by the end of the season. He was really good about being coachable in that way. But I never turn to my left. I don't go, hey, Johnny, you got to go. I always turn to my right and I look this way first and then I look back. So, sometimes knowing your position coach is unique, but I had a tendency to go to the right. And so about 3/4 of the way through the season, I asked him, I said, hey man, do you mind if I go to the left? Because he had a great relationship with both. And our receiver coach is tremendous because he got to coach him in middle school and then he got to progress with them up to the high school. So he's coached them for like 5 to 6 years. So he's had a tremendous relationship with both of those kids. So for me as the new guy in the room, I had to build that day one. And I built a pretty good rapport on the right side with our senior, but I thought, well, let's get a challenge and let's go to the left side for the last 2 weeks of the year so I can build that rapport with a junior receiver. So I have kind of that stepping stone going into next year where it's not just the new guy yelling at you, right? Or the new guy coaching you up and you go, yeah, man, whatever. Like you don't have a relationship with that kid. Not that he's trying to blow you off, but he just doesn't have that relationship or that rapport with you. And so for us, it was important that we got to switch sides and do that because he had the upper hand, and so really I just wanted to play off of him from that perspective.
Coach, insides, you have H's, there's the inline Y. What about you? How do you guys present the material? Because all of a sudden in this new era of football, which I think is super awesome, that the country kind of is moving into, where it's almost egalitarian. Like, hey, we can fit all these different roles. Or what do you do in your your meetings to present this info?
So on Mondays, the scouting report is presented. And then we'll go into, we lift Monday, Wednesday, Fridays in the morning. We did this year. And then on those days, we had a 20-minute meeting on Mondays and Wednesdays following that, solely focused on understanding the scouting report that was presented. So instead of concentrating on the whole thing, we go to look at, these are the coverages, these are players. And so that's kind of what we start looking at on a Monday. We did it a bunch of different ways we would talk about it. And then we found that, really when we got the most bang for our buck is we would talk about it, we would present it on the board, then we'd erase it. And then we'd have a senior come up and do, one of those, one of our starters.
I love that.
And then we go, okay, cool, erase that. And now we go back to like a basic concept and we bring up a sophomore and say, hey, you have to draw, stick right. And you go, okay. And they may know stick right and they get it right and they get to sit down. If they don't know it, then we bring the senior back up and the senior goes, hey, this is stick right. These are your landmarks. This is where you have to go. And this is the basic offense. And then we bring the sophomore back up and he has to redraw stick right exactly the way the senior just did. And so one of the things that we found is like we could sit in that dark room and watch film for an hour, or we could watch, about a half an hour of film, maybe 20 minutes. And now we start getting back on the board and we start getting those guys interacting and talking. I had the luxury is I didn't run the receiver meetings. I ran special teams ones, but Coach Collins ran our receiver ones. And so I got to sit in the back of the room and that's where you see either the heads like bob up and down, like, yeah, that's right. Or nope, he's not even close. And you go, okay. So I kind of know, who knows it, who doesn't. And so, then you get the luxury of like, hey, Joe, go draw, stick around on the board. Because, not because I'm picking on that kid, but I know he doesn't know it. And so by doing that, I can give a leadership opportunity back to a starter to go, okay, you don't know it. Let me draw it for you. Let me explain it. And then that kid gets to go back up and he gets to lean on that, junior or senior to help him get through that. So that's kind of the way that we started presenting it, really a lot through the beginning of the season. And a different caveat, and I know you and I have talked about this, but our varsity and JV are combined. So, our position group room, we had 18 receivers in our position group room, from seniors down to sophomores. And so, how do you engage a sophomore that may not play on Friday nights, right, but has to get ready for a JV game and run the basic offense? Those seniors and juniors that are starting, they know it. And so they have the opportunity to coach those younger guys. And so anytime we could present a formation, we could put a simple 8 block piece of paper in front of them with just a basic O-line drawn out and go, okay, show me these 8 formations, or we would we'd write a play up on the board and then they got to draw it. And then we get to go around and we get to coach them up, or you get to phone a friend or, however you want to do it as a position coach. Right. So like, you kind of look to your left and your right, not that you're cheating. You go, hey, what's the answer on this one? And so, but you get to use the room. So instead of me standing up there and lecturing about, stick right and hitting your landmark at 3 yards and, how to roll out of it and, how to throw an MOR or how to throw, the back shoulder or how to hit a whole shot against cover 2, those guys get to start teaching that stuff. And then what we did with our senior guys is we started putting shells in front of them. We said, okay, you have a cover 2 shell. Now you have stick right. Where do you think the ball's going?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that, I told like our H's we're going to work on this year is we're going to learn the whole offense concept so that you know how you fit in that. Because you may be the number one read because you're running the stick route, but the stick route may be gone, but it doesn't mean you adjust your route. It means you carry your route because now the second route is open or the third route is open. So
yes.
So that's kind of how we're going to attack that receiver room, because we have 5 returning guys that all played varsity snaps in our, out of our top, 5, maybe we can go all the way down to like 6 and 7. So we're going to be very deep at receiver this year in a highly competitive room. So, how do you set yourself apart? You set it apart by your knowledge of assignment. And so, we have to do that, and we have to teach them how you fit in the big picture. And I think today, that's somewhat gets lost just because, we may do a bad job of presenting the whole picture. We may do, hey, you just have to run the post route. Okay, but why? And you go, well, your post route opens up the underneath post route or the underneath dig route that's coming across, or that guy's running an out. And so now we're reading the corner or reading the high safety. That safety carries with you. Well, you have to run your post to carry the high safety. So then now we can throw to that other guy.
You sound like Cooper Kupp giving his post-game interview, man. You're just talking all the specifics of how to beat. I love it. I mean, you're absolutely right. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm just like, you get me all excited because you're right, man. I love it.
So and then, how do you celebrate the other guy? And so that, then you start celebrating other people's accomplishments, which is really hard. And I probably harken back to 16-year-old Zach Fleming and go, yeah, I'm probably not in that mentality or that frame of work. But I also wish I had a coach that said, hey, this is how the whole picture looks. This is how your job on Friday night is going to help us win. You may catch 1 ball on Friday night, but this kid may catch 6 and we win. And then next week, you're going to catch 6. He catches 1, and we rinse and repeat, and we go.
I wanted to ask you real quick, Aaron, when you're talking about like being in the room with 18, wide receivers and being in there with those guys. And that was kind of similar to the college setting when I'm thinking about it, when you asked me, what was like at Dubuque.
Yeah.
You got you're about 18, 20 receivers, and you got, seniors, you got your level of guys. And like I said, for those freshmen, the most basic stuff is still super complicated. Like you're saying, like draw stick right. Every senior wide receiver should be able to draw every position's route on that play, but the one guy maybe is still just struggling to learn his. I'm curious, as you mentioned that you have your varsity and your JV guys, and your JV offense is obviously you're running the same offense and the same thing. How do you go about film in the sense of making it beneficial for everybody? Maybe not, like I said, when all your older guys understand the basic stuff and you can start working on those tweaks, like putting up that cover 2 shell, the receivers, they'll understand how they might need to adjust, and based on the coverage. Do you just full on teach, you go about or I guess a wide receiver coach, do they go about teaching it as if it's just for the varsity guys? And the younger guys just get a chance to kind of learn all that? Or are there ways where you kind of break it down a little bit so that the young guys don't get too lost?
Yeah. So we set up our individual period where it's really like type agnostic individual. So it's not individual for just varsity guys. It's not individual for just JV. So if everybody's going to run an individual drill, everybody's going to run it. So, that day we may say, hey, we're really bad at running a 10-yard out. And so all 18 kids are going to run the 10-yard out, twice to the left and twice to the right. And what, we kind of did in the fall is we charted every drop and catch of every receiver through the fall. And then what we found is we didn't have to do that once we got into week 1 and week 2, week 3, that separation had already been made on who was going to play where. But what I could do is then I could go back in the film room. And again, I had the luxury that I'm not the primary receiver coach. So maybe I can talk to a kid off to the side of like, hey, you see how he ran his 10-yard out and he broke it at 9 and rolled it over to 10. Well, he did it because of this. We talk about snapping a hard out, and then we talk about running a speed out. So a lot of times when we run our individual drills, we'll run those different route trees, and then we'll watch film. And I'm going to try and pick a guy that's not on film. Maybe my sophomore age that's doing a lot of JV stuff. I'm going to talk to him about, hey, you see how he did it? This is the why. And then we have JV film. So I'll go back and I'll watch the JV film, and we all coach the JV game. So we get to watch them. But I may say, hey, look at plays 9 on the JV game. Look at how you ran this route. And then, we may fix that in practice during the individual time or something else. So, it's really hard sometimes when you're combined to take the time to invest in a JV guy. I think the meeting room is a great time to do it. I think if you can take 80% of your meeting and gear it towards the varsity guys, because really that's a lot of what you're gearing it towards. And if you're combined, then maybe that last 10 minutes, you look at, the JV film, or you look at whatever drill work you can do, or however you can get a senior interacting with a sophomore to kind of build that knowledge gap. Because, we can say, hey, look on Huddle, the presentation's on Huddle. But that kid may not learn that way. And so
totally,
so it may be look on Huddle. And then, cause we had a kid this year that, he had a hard time understanding our smash concept and the backside of smash. And so he was like, Coach, I just don't get it. And so I was like, well, let's create a riddle in our brain, or let's create, a visual diagram, or let's create, a simple, one word answer to kind of fix what it is. And so, by week 9, he got it. But, it took 8 weeks of fumbling through, hey, how about this, or how about this, or how about this? And so not getting frustrated with those guys, because they don't get, they may get 2% of the reps, but they have to know, 100% of the base offense. And so, it's working after practice is a little bit of it too, meeting times. And
you talked about building that scouting report, which is you guys practice a lot like how colleges, how I've noticed colleges have done it, which I think is awesome when you have that JV varsity opportunity to do that. So on Mondays, when you're putting it together, that scouting report, do you do scout team meetings as well? With the JV guys or guys that you may know that are kind of assigned to the scout team, and how do you balance that between obviously getting them ready for a JV game? That's not like they're not going to be playing in a game, but obviously, also getting them to give you a chance to get a good look.
Yeah. The unique situation that we have is that our JV and freshmen play on Monday nights. And so here in Oklahoma, you can play 8 quarters of football. So I think most of the Western states, at least the states that I coached in, were 6. So the way they get around that is they play on Mondays, and then that gives you 3 days to recover to play on Fridays. And so a lot of your JV guys will be your special teams guys then on Friday. So when I present my special teams meeting, I have my special teams depth that's already built into my presentations. And so those guys know Monday before they play their JV game, they know they're going to play or rep on Friday night. And so they're going to play that Monday game. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is solely focused on their special teams aspect. And then it's being what we call look squad or scout, however you want to phrase it, for that offense or defense. And so we switched it up this year, and we went to a lot of pod work. So the first 5 minutes was flex and form run like everybody does. We had 20 minutes of special teams. And then we had however much individual time we needed that week. And then after individual time, you went to your pods. And those pods were guys that would service the varsity defense. Offensive guys would go. Because our offensive defensive guys wear different jerseys. And so it's very easy to delineate who's on offensive defense, just like a college would be. And then the defensive guys that would service us would come over during that pod work time. And that's when we did inside run, skelly, 9-on-7 drill. I'm missing one more. And then we ran through, our scripts. And then what we would do is during that, after that period was over, the whole program would come back together and we did best on best. So our first team offense would go against our first team defense. And then
A college practice, and I love it.
It was really a college practice. And then our first team defense would go against first team offense or the best available. And then what we did this year is we put a 10-minute JV period in. And so if you were going to play, on Mondays, that wasn't a factor because that's a scout team day. But Tuesday, Wednesdays, if you were going to play JV the following week, you would get your reps during that 10-minute period. And it was all scripted, just like a normal practice was. So it felt very much like you were part of the practice like everybody else is, which is, the key when you have an integrated team. And I think we did it better this year than I've seen in a lot of years that I've seen it. So, and then the last thing we did was just another good on good session at the end. Which gave the varsity guys a break in the middle of practice, So it was a natural break for them, and then what we try to do is we try to create an environment where those guys would then either coach or cheer on the JV guys. So, one of the big things that I told Coach Jones when I took the job is, I want us, and I got this from another, successful coach up in the Pacific Northwest, to speak life into guys. So like use their name specifically, instead of saying like, good job, or run harder, or do whatever, you picked a guy that day and you spoke life into that guy. And what it doesn't always happen because they're high school kids, but our kids, did a pretty good job of it. But what ends up happening is you start finding those relationships being built inside of your rooms. So specifically with our receivers, they may have said, hey, and again, let's just go stick right. Hey, stick right, you have an MOR, which means mandatory outside release. And he was like, yeah, I released inside because the corner was outside leverage. Well, no, dude, you have to go outside because that's what the route calls for. And so they started either coaching them, or they started directly encouraging them when they make a big play, something happens. And so you start getting that feeding of life into that JV period instead of just being a period where the varsity guys go drink water, talk to each other, and then come back. So
all your kids live together, JV and varsity, everyone?
JV varsity live together. And this year we had 113. So it's a pretty monumental task getting them through the weight room, but they all live together.
113, 10 through 12.
10 through 12, and then we had 60 freshmen. So, and then freshmen lifted on a different schedule. So we lifted Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They lifted Tuesday, Thursday, which is why we did it that way. So they lifted in season, and we lifted in season just at different times.
So cloth. We're just talking about gotta look good, play good, coach good. I got you there. What can cloth do for a program? Once they're in the program, what are some are there creative ways that you've seen cloth used? I've seen Randy Jackson with the question mark, like what are you going to become? All that stuff. Have you come across any cool ways to use cloth to build that identity in that program?
How do you brand your program? And so, if the school says this is the mascot and you go, okay, got it. Or the school says, hey, we've had 10 different mascots. The school's out in California. We were blue and gold. We never wore gold. We were always yellow. So I was like, okay, well, what really is our identity? Is it blue and gold or is it blue and yellow? And so, I think finding a way through t-shirts, this year we did special team socks for the guys, which one kid's like, oh, great. Thanks, man. Socks, just what I needed. And so it was like that Christmas, opening of the gift, but you try to find different things, that, everybody gets t-shirts. And so it was an idea of like, well, maybe we'll do socks. I think next year we're going to do lanyards, and I'll put the lanyard in the locker, something like that. For the special teams player of the week. And then I gave it to, if they accrued enough plays on special teams, they earn their socks. And so, I think with jerseys, if you're Penn State or Alabama, you are who you are. If you're in a program that doesn't have that identity, then you have that chance to capture it, make it. I think, for me, depending on your budgetary constraints, I think uniforms is a great way to kind of differentiate and make your team unique. Helmets are super expensive, so probably 2 sets of helmets would be tough. But jersey sets may be easier, or pant sets, or even 7-on-7 stuff in the summer. Maybe just having a set of 7-on-7 unis in the summer they wear. And so I think uniform and cloth is super important, because I think as our view on society changes and the way we interact as people, that individualistic part of it becomes big. A way for a kid to represent himself, that number, the name on the back of the jersey and the front of the jersey. So I think if you can be multiple in your jerseys, I would love to. Anytime I can put, the name and the branding on kids that are going to go to my program, I think that's super important as well. So hopefully that answered your question.
Absolutely. Do you guys do names on the back of the jerseys at Norman?
We don't. What we do is our head coach did a good job. He and I can't remember the bumper on the back. He gets names, those decals made on the names of the back. And so every kid has a name on the back of his helmet. Is the way we do it at Norman North. And then, we have, I think 4 sets of jerseys, 4 sets of pants. We only have 1 set of helmets. We changed the look. They were green, dark green, I think, when the school opened. The helmets were black at one time, and now they're white. So I think those are little subtle changes you can make too. I know, Soldotna changed the colors of their helmets, every couple of years. When I was in California, kids would vote on the different decals that would go on the helmets. So you kind of put, 10 helmet decals up there, and then the team votes on which ones they want to wear that year. So that's another way that you can kind of do it, where it's not just a stagnant, I just put the logo on the side of the helmet and a stripe, and we go, maybe it's the initials of the schools, or, script writing, numbers, whatever it is. I think there's ways to involve every student athlete in your program to have a voice kind of in your uniform selection that way.
I like that whole entire, giving each kid an opportunity to have their own voice. That's all good stuff, Coach. Well, I guess real quick, is there any other questions or any other stuff you have for us, or anything else you wanted to go over, take a chance to go over?
I guess, from Tim, who's been doing this for a long time, and, if you walked into a new program today, what would be one thing you would change, having all of the knowledge and experience and the hindsight of 2020 to look at?
Man, I tell you what, the number one thing, especially of 2020, 2021, is that the kids are craving adults that are willing to pour into their lives. And so you got to find a space. I think it came up with the strength and conditioning. You talked about outside, bumper weights, whatever it takes, but you got to create a space for them. And having a classroom that's open for lunch for me this year, it's just I always had one, right? Mm-hmm. But I feel like a rookie coach all over again, because the kids are coming into the room and they're just craving attention, man. And if we can give them positive attention, I mean, you said some stuff that really hit me today. I love the idea of the decals on the back of the helmet with their name. It's a budgetary thing that's affordable. Yeah. Names on the back of the jersey isn't necessarily affordable unless you're going to do new jerseys every year.
Right.
But again, giving them a space to belong to has been the number one thing. If I went to a program, I would be like, where do all the guys hang out? Mm-hmm. I'd want to know that, and then I'd want to start being there, and then slowly merge that into the place that we hang out. Hey, we're going to hang out in Coach so-and-so's room. It doesn't got to be the head coach's room. It can be anywhere. It might even be the lunchroom. I don't know. But finding that place has been that's the biggest change. That's the obvious thing for me coming out of 2021 or 2020, whatever year we're in right now. That's the obvious thing to me. And then, the things that we did when we came over to West, we did change the helmet color. We were orange for 2 years until we could afford new ones, and we painted them white. kind of that those subtle things. And, and one of our kids, one of the guys in Connor's class, he was pretending to be from Auburn. He kept saying War Eagle, War Eagle. Well, to me, it sounded like he was saying One Eagle. I'm like, that's pretty badass, man. We got to get a One Eagle up. So we started talking about that. So this guy, who's now basically a pro snowboarder somewhere in the mountains of Colorado, making it with a bad Southern impression, has now got a thing that I probably hashtag every single piece of media that goes out in West. So the branding, all that stuff is really important. But you said it earlier, and I think this is really good. You really got to do your research and where you go, what you find out. Because if you just come to Alaska, there's a big difference between Bartlett, Lathrop, Soldotna, and West. There's going to be four very different places and mentalities of kids to work with. So that's yep. Okay.
Connor, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So going from Anchorage to Dubuque, back to Anchorage, you've sat in some position group rooms for a lengthy amount of time, I imagine. Creating an identity inside of those rooms, I think, is key. I think for a head coach, sometimes, in an idealistic way of giving your position coaches their own little programs inside their position group rooms. How do you feel about that going from, West to Dubuque and then back to West? How do you build that inside of your rooms?
No, I mean, I think it's super important, like in the sense of, like you said, giving your position coaches that opportunity to just kind of, have their own moment of time with the kids and to get a chance to really teach and have them learn. I think the biggest thing, and I stressed it to kids as soon as I got to college, is like, you have to enjoy film. Like you can't dread going to a film session. Yeah. And I know in college, like, it's required. So like, and part of it might be, depending on where you're at, because you might dread it because the kid's going to be in there for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then if you're a kid who's never on the field, you're not really sitting there watching yourself. So how can you make it interesting for that freshman kid who's not up there? He's not getting a chance to watch himself on the screen for 2 hours. He's watching somebody else. And so, how can you make it so that kid's, not only paying attention, but like interacting, he's learning the whole time. I think that's a challenge that I constantly got frustrated with, because I had one coach who was super old school, and he would just sit there, like sit in his chair with a laser pointer and just, MF you. And I mean, and if you were listening, tons and tons of coaching points. But if you're not listening, you're just, hearing them talk. It's just a dark room with a grumpy guy and a laser pointer. And like I said, and it's hard enough to be the guy that's getting yelled at. But then when you're not even the guy that's on the field getting yelled at, and you're just watching, you know what I mean? So a lot of that, where like I said, there are good coaching points in that. But if a kid's not really listening and he's not engaged, I think, it obviously is not beneficial in any sort of way. So I always enjoyed a coach that was going to be up and active, and get kids on the board and make it fun. Okay. Maybe you have an hour-long meeting, but maybe you're only watching 30 minutes of film, or you're watching 20 minutes of film. The rest of that is just, kids on the board, or just kind of, going over different plays, kind of having fun with it. Now, I think that was always a good way to like get kids that were excited to be there. Yeah. Then they aren't going into it going, here we go. They can be excited to be in a room, but at the same time, they got to know that, it's not just here to mess around and laugh at the bloopers, on film and guys getting blown up or whatever. Like, you want to get there to get better. And so I think that's been a huge part. And I know even sometimes, like for, in college, like I said, it's required. You got to be in there watching film for however long coach says. But in high school, you maybe don't have those same type of opportunities and stuff. And so you got to make it do. And so that just goes into how can you make 20 minutes of film, which isn't a whole lot of time, but how can you make that beneficial for a bunch of kids? So, A, they were happy to be there, and, B, that they obviously learned something from it, took something away from it in the time being too. And so, I don't know. I think it's always, like I said, you hear coaches stress all the time that even if you aren't on the screen, watch the guy and learn from the guy ahead of you, which, it says something too, but I think it's beneficial to get kids involved and engaged so they can learn, if all your wide receivers are watching film together, like I said, the outside guys are just watching themselves on the outside, they're not watching the guy on the inside. So how can you make it fun so all those guys can get a chance to not only learn their specific, position, but maybe the guy next to them, and those type of ways. But there's definitely been times in high school where I think we should be watching more film, but at the same time, like, if kids aren't in there engaged and they're just not into it, it's not beneficial.
I'm just glad. I'm just blessed, man. I took a few notes. It got a little crazy. The note session got a little crazy. Connors are so much more organized than me. When I'm note taking, this is what we got here. That's a beautiful thing there, CFAC.
I just try to keep it organized so I can go back and not just have to turn my paper around to read what I'm doing like you, man.
Oh, dude, I'm screwed for this one. I got to edit this. So
it's on video.
I get a chance to watch this thing again. But hey, man, I appreciate you. Best of luck to you guys. Stay warm.
Yeah.
Your cold spell of 50-degree weather you got down there.
You're probably still golfing down there in that. Come on.
Yeah, I went golfing last week, so it's not that bad.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, man. Tell Brent Venables I said hi.
Yeah.
When you get a chance. Are people excited down there for that?
Super stoked. I think there was like zero work production this last week in the state of Oklahoma, or at least on this part of the state.
Everybody was out looking for a coach.
Yeah. So it's, everybody was, I think everybody had tagged him like day one after Lincoln Riley left. And, one of the unique things is I'm not from the state. And so I don't have a bias one way or the other. But you can definitely tell who's an OU and who's an OSU fan and how deeply that runs. And so there's a very deep hatred for Lincoln Riley from a lot of people that live in this state. And it was all erased when Brent got hired. And so, everybody's super excited for him to come in. And I think rightfully so. You turn down enough jobs to get the right job you want. And, I think he's the man for the job. And if he gets the right assistant coaches around him, OU is OU. So, it's still a destination job for a lot of people. And I think now what we're seeing is that transition of people from where they're from. Not that it should matter, but it does. Like Mario Crispo is going back to Miami because he's from Miami. Yeah. Brent Venables is from Kansas. There's guys that are from the South that are naturally migrate back to where they're from. So I think it's important, but I also think it's important because a lot of times you fit right into that culture and you understand it and you know it and you know what makes that part of the country tick and think, and you know how to get them fired up, you know how to push the right buttons, you know how to recruit the kids in those homes.
Hey, the next episode after this one, Becky and I are going to be doing a Bowl Mania review, and then we're going to put the link up. So we're excited to get the Bowl Mania competition. I think Feckley is the reigning champion right now, correct? You're back to back. Well, you tied my sister, and she beat you, or you beat her?
It was a tiebreaker, wasn't it, or something?
It was, yeah. 2 years ago.
2 years ago, it was a tiebreaker.
2 years ago, you
won, but it came down to a tiebreaker, I think.
Yeah, which I've never seen before. So that was epic. So, CFAC, you are back-to-back champion right now in the league.
I'll tell you what, though, looking at the bowl games this year, I don't know. There's a lot of good games. Like, I was really surprised. It's going to be fun going over them all. Sidebar, how's Nevada? How's Nevada going to do?
I don't think Carson Strong's going to play. That's the word on the street. And then they're without. I love Vitala. I think he's a solid coach for Nevada as the interim coach. I think it's a really strange move to go inter-conference Mountain West, because normally you go Mountain West to Power 5. But, when you pay a guy essentially $1.1 million a year and they have an indoor facility and everything you didn't have in Nevada. So Nevada's still going to be good. I just don't know. I think one of the big parts of the Bulls is who's going to play, and not to get into the realm of, guys making that decision. But I think it does. If you're going to pick bowl games, I think you should pay attention to coaching moves and which guys are going to play in the game. Regardless of whether they're declaring or whatever happens, but sometimes it makes a little bit of a difference.
I was going to say, I'm kind of switching gears on you, but it just popped into my mind. And I just wanted to ask you real quick, how big for like seniors down there in Oklahoma that might be, more heavenly or ranked or stars or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
How does the NIL stuff, has that affected any sort of the kids getting during the recruiting process that you know about or anything like that?
I haven't heard about it here, but I'm not directly tied into a lot of our recruiting stuff. So our head coach takes care of a lot of that.
Gotcha. I was just wondering.
I haven't heard about it. The only thing I know is like, the guys that are either leaving school early to go into their freshman year so they can sign an NIL deal. I think that talk is eventually going to trickle down into the high schools, which will be a slippery slope of who regulates it and how it's regulated. I think, I don't want to speak out of turn. I think Kentucky's like kind of leading the charge on that. There's a school kind of in that area that's looking at NIL deals for high school players and how to do it. So that'll be interesting when that first domino falls.
Well, Coachy, we're wrapping up here. Thank you again. We appreciate you greatly, man. I'm looking forward to re-listening to this. This is going to be one that I'm definitely going to put back on and listen to again. And just again, appreciate you staying up super late. I know I
think I'm still in Alaska time, so it works out.
Shoot. Time zones, man. They're great.
Yeah.
Hey, we appreciate you. I'm Timbo B. Davis. I coach football. That guy over there,
Carter B. Feckley, and I coach football, and I appreciate it.
Coach Fleming also coaches football. All this is convenient. This was a football podcast. Thank you very much, guys. Have a wonderful night.